Beautiful. Hashtag Genio. Throughout the roasting process, you will find that you're going to need to make adjustments. And those adjustments are going to impact the overall roast. So each phase is vitally important that the one flows beautifully into the other. Underdevelopment is generally a case that you've lost control of the roast. You've reached the profile that you desire, but you haven't had enough time in caramelization. And without that time in caramelization, you're going to experience a lack of complexity, a lack of full flavor and finish. So ensure that you get your development up between 15 and 25%. If it's gone below that, before you make any rash changes, try to taste the coffee and see what you're getting out of it. If it's not what you desire, slow your roast down a little bit that you get more time through Maillard, and coming into first crack, when it goes exothermic, you need to dial it back and slow down your roast slightly. And that'll give you a much better caramelization and development percentage, which ultimately will give you a better tasting roast. With underdevelopment, it's not going to be a case of you're going to lose flavor. If you've got sufficient Maillard reaction, you'll have flavor, but you're not going to end up with the finish that you're looking for. So we're going to end up with a coffee that might not be multi-dimensional. It's going to be one-dimensional. We're going to lack complexity, and we're going to lose the finish that we've been looking for with the coffee. We might experience flavors that are a little bit flat, might be a subtle undertone of the bean that we don't enjoy that starts coming through. And a lot of the time, if we drop it out too soon and we haven't developed all those sugars, we end up just with a one-dimensional taste up front as well as that finish. So it's not going to have that complexity and that changing in flavor when it comes to that first sip through to the last sip in the cup. So in some cases, underdeveloped coffee could be dark or even very, very light, depending on how the entire roast profile and process has gone. So there's no real visual indicator with underdevelopment other than the fact that I feel you should taste it, and that will confirm that you haven't reached the full potential of the coffee. Moisture content in coffee is not necessarily evident in underdeveloped coffee because through the roasting process, the initial phase, a lot of the drying is taking place. So with underdeveloped coffee, you may not pick up that there's been a drastic drop in moisture content. So it's not really a major concern. But if it's a case you're starting with a very low moisture content coffee, it may impact each phase, which, yes, will directly impact the final phase of roasting. Overdevelopment can be seen in two different ways. Firstly, you can find out that the coffee, or you can see that the coffee is much darker than what it should be. The general consensus is that you're going to end up with a darker roasted coffee because you haven't gone through each phase correctly. In some cases where you have stagnated your roast and then you try to push the development, you can end up with a medium roasted coffee with a high overdevelopment percentage. That would impact the quality of the coffee. It's going to become overly complex, possibly very sharp. You're going to develop way too many flavors, and you're going to end up breaking down all that sugar and potentially destroying the final taste. And it's going to impact the quality that you're going to get from your bean. Baked coffee is where you see your roast profile has completely stagnated, and the time of your roast is a real indicator to how bad your roast is going to be. So if you're roasting a standard batch and you're starting to push at about 14, 15, 16 minutes, you're roasting too long, and especially if it's coming out at a medium, then you have stagnated your roast. You've possibly started with a lower charge temperature than you need to. You're constantly playing catch up, and you're going to notice it in the roast. Baked coffee will generally taste grassy, grain-like, wheaty, and lack a lot of flavor. The bean will be very hard, and when you grind it, you will hear it. It's a lot more intense on the grinder, and you'll smell it. It'll smell very, very hay-like or grainy. So it's very important that you ensure that your profile, the time of your roast, and your temperature come together nicely, that you end up with a roast that's not baked. So watch that carefully. Choose the right charge temperature, choose the right drum speed, and choose the right airflow. Baked coffee will generally occur throughout every phase of roasting. If you slow down your roast too much and you don't build up enough energy, you'll see it in your curve. Your curve won't be sharp moving upward. You will get a more flatter curve. So you need to keep an eye on that. You'll see an increase in the curve if you obviously increase your temperature, but it'll generally come out throughout the entire roast. Most roasters will experience baked coffee when they try to slow their roast down, going into first crack, exothermic, they end up slowing down the roast either too soon or too late, and then they end up stagnating the roast, ending up with a very low ROR and ending up with a coffee with an undesirable taste. Scorching is related a lot to your charge temperature. If you're charging a bean too high and you possibly have a drum speed that is too low, the contact time and the heat that's coming onto the drum will actually scorch the surface, the flat surfaces of the bean. This can also happen towards the end of the roast if you're not tapering your gas down and increasing your airflow. You'll get scorching towards the end of the roast and you'll end up with a more brittle, undesirable, ashy taste in your coffee. Eliminating scorching with higher grown beans or even low altitude beans is basically trial and error. You need to take out a sample of beans as you've come around your turning point and have a look closely at the beans. I like to look once or twice over a space of a minute after turning point. If there's any discoloration or darker colors on the surface where it's the start of scorching, and then you need to dial it back. Generally in that case, the problem is the damage is already done and you need to learn from that mistake and try not to do it on the second roast. If you're going to do that roast again, decrease your charge temperature or increase your drum speed to compensate for that scorching. Scorching and tipping are very, very similar, but tipping can happen generally as the bean gets a lot lighter after first crack, where it starts rolling. What happens is if you've increased your gas at any point going into first crack, and because you seem to have lost energy, you're going to end up heating up the edge of that drum. You're going to be introducing heat transfer through conductivity again, and you're going to end up getting darkened points on the tips of the beans. Remember, with tipping, it's all about controlling your gas and your airflow towards the end of the roast. What that'll do is allow you to finish off your roast consistently and have a good uniform color at the end of the roast. So ensure that you've tapered off on that gas and on that airflow accordingly, and then you won't end up with any of those scorching or tipping defects. It is inevitable that you're going to experience problems as a roaster. Baked, scorched, tipped, underdeveloped, overdeveloped. Look at the graphs. Look at what's gone wrong. Taste your coffee on a regular basis, and you will face those challenges and you will defeat those challenges.